let's talk a little bit more about pre-processing, and then you guys are we're gonna turn you guys loose, and you guys can start digging in, and we'll sort of have a bit more, walking everybody. We're not gonna walk you guys through stuff as much. We're gonna start giving you tools and let you guys play, and then when you're stuck, we'll maybe throw something up on the screen and show everybody if we're stuck with something. So we're getting much more into the hands-on. Let's start just doing stuff. Let's cranking through stuff. So we're gonna continue today. Looking at new data sets, but in particular, this one we want to focus on something that's maybe a bit messy or a little dirty or not particularly, completely checked and groomed for us. And so that falls into this pre-processing category of coming through and cleaning stuff up so we can get to the fun of data analysis. And as a reminder from last time, we really need to always do a check on any data set that we have that we haven't used before, that's not ours, to make sure that we don't have junk at the start, because if we have junk at the start, we'll have junk coming out. So as a reminder, what we talked about before, this is the basic approach. You're going to first open up your data set, spend a couple minutes just looking at, make sure you know what all the variables are, what all the units mean, etc. And then you're going to do a little bit of exploratory summary stats, right? Okay, so what's my range here? What's the average value? That type of stuff. Maybe a quick and dirty sort of just, quick sketch, quick visual sketch, or in your mind a layout of a sketch. See if you can knock out a quick graph and just make sure the data can kind of work for that. And then once we do that, we can start to look for patterns, and then we can start to work on our real, more professional, official thing. Throughout this whole step, throughout these whole steps, this whole thing, we might be going back and doing pre-processing, right, and checking. So first, maybe on that initial orientation, we note, oh my gosh, there's something up with this data. I got to fix that. That thing looks wrong. And we might do that, and then as we go in and try to do summary stats, we might get an error and find that, there's some letters in this column. I thought there were supposed to be numbers, and so I got to go back and clean that, etc. So it's an iterative process oftentimes. Okay, so some of the ones I just want to flag for you, and there's, as we've said before, with these powerful tools, there's many, many ways to accomplish a similar thing. And so what we're showing you here is, as with before, we're just starting with some of the basic formula-based equations that we could use. So the first one we might want to do is we might want to remove non-printable characters, the things that are kind of like hidden spaces and stuff like that. And so there's a couple different, and again, there's not one correct way, but these are just options. So for example, what I'm showing you here, where it says clean or trim, that's where we type the equal sign, and then we'd put in CLEAN, and then in parentheses, that would be my range of data. So either the individual cell or the entire row or the range of data, whatever. So you can just substitute whatever the range is in my little notations here. So one is clean. And that's going to pull off all non-printable text and then return the rest of the characters there. Trim is going to pull off any extra spaces except between two words. So if I said sun space rise and applied trim to it, or if I said space sun space rise space, it's going to go through and return sun space rise, right? It's going to take off the extra stuff except for the stuff in between words. Substitute is going to take whatever that text is and replace it with something else. So it's going to look for in this case, every time, and so it might not look like it, but what I've done here is I've said, hey, here's my command substitute, here's the range, and look for a blank a text spot, right? So let's look for where there's just a space in there and return this. It doesn't look like there's anything here, it's because there isn't. So the thing that's being returned is a blank value, right? So there's nothing between those two quotes, those two quote marks. Yeah, and then we can this will turn stuff into text. This is a pretty helpful, This is a pretty helpful one. This will join several text string into one text string, and that can work for both one cell or many cells. So let's say we had a list of our class, and the first person's name, a row that had like, so maybe mine said Sean, and then the next row said Anderson, and I wanted it to return one in a cell that said Sean Anderson, right? So I could use this type of formula. We can also use ampersands and other approaches, but that would help us do that. And then sometimes and this is especially common when people have manually entered text values, United States, Los Angeles, or that type of stuff. Sometimes we accidentally drop the L, the capital L becomes a lowercase l, or vice versa. So these groups of formula will help us deal with the accidental or inadvertent capitalization or not capitalization, as the case may be. And so lower will just turn everything into lowercase letters. Upper will turn everything into uppercase letters. And proper will turn it into whatever the text is, the very first letter will be capitalized. So if it was Los Angeles, if I wrote Los Angeles with all lowercase letters, it would turn it into capital L, lowercase o, lowercase s, and then capital A, rest lowercase for Angeles. And then another one that we mentioned a little bit last time, but just wanted to bring to your attention again, is a really powerful term is our if statements. So ifs are logical, are a group of logical things. And there's sum if, we've already used sum if and count if, but this, you can also use just naked if, right? Which is, if this is the case, and how that works is, so here's my range, and then if it's true, and so we'd tell it something. So if this equals 1, then say yes, right? And then I hit a comma, and what I would reply if that condition was not met. And then the powerful thing with these things, as with all of these, but in particular this if-then statements, is we can nest these within itself. So we can also say if it's true, we could put some parentheses in here and put another conditional statement in, and another, and we can nest them. So if is a very basic action that we potentially could make very complex depending on how nested we make it. So those are a few examples. And then two others real quickly before we turn you guys loose, we just want to bring to your attention are, and so I'd say these are all very basic. These are all pretty simple, straightforward. Then we have a couple of more elegant, more powerful tools that can help us for searching data, for aligning data, that type of stuff. And so one of those, which is an older one, is called VLOOKUP. So if you're talking to someone about this, you would pronounce this particular tool VLOOKUP. This is an older version. This is the first version that Excel came out with many years ago. And this is the instruction, right? So unlike some of these other ones where it's like select a range and put a statement, this guy has many, a thing here, comma, a thing here, comma, a thing here, comma, etc. Some of them, such as in this case, the range lookup, are optional. The optional ones are indicated by being in this bracket, so you can put it in, but you don't have to. And if you don't have to, it'll do its own thing. But this can be VLOOKUPs can be really helpful for finding certain things, for summarizing, that kind of stuff. This was before we had pivot tables, is when this thing was first invented. This is kind of like a more basic pivot table type of approach. So this generally is a fine thing. But VLOOKUP will work best when we have relatively small data sets. What's a small data set? I'd say 500 rows, something like that, ish. So that would be a smaller data set. This is only going to propagate from left to right, which might not make any sense now, but I'll just say it's a bit limited. And as we start to get more than 750, 1,000 rows, it might take especially if you have an older computer, it might take a little bit of time to get the answer. And because it was one of these older things that we have, it's sensitive to how we lay out the data. So if we lay out the data and it's all perfectly great and everything good, you can use it and it usually works, not a problem. But if we start to then mess with the data, move columns around, whereas some of our tools will be very robust and respond to that, VLOOKUP, it will easily get screwed up. So it's the older, less efficient version. XLOOKUP is the modern take on it. So XLOOKUP can do everything that VLOOKUP can do and just a little more powerful, a little more powerfully. So the setup looks fairly similar, and I'll post a video for you guys for how to do XLOOKUP, because this is one that you guys probably won't play with, but then when you want to use it, you're gonna be like, oh my god, how to do it? And so it's just nice to have a video that will look up. This is really helpful if, let's say, we had zip code data on one set of one data sheet, and then and some attribute about that, maybe demographics, and then on another data sheet we had zip code data with maybe some of our survey results, and we wanted to sort of link those two things, for example. So XLOOKUP would be a really convenient tool to do that kind of stuff. So I'll say that. So all the stuff we're talking about here, our first exercise, we want you guys to start playing with this next data set in Excel. And it's a relatively small data set. It's only several hundred rows. Once we start to get to more complex data sets, so not today, but soon, some of this data cleaning will start to become a problem, right? So if we have a dozen lines to look over, you guys can do it. You can eyeball it. You can glance up and down and do at least a fairly decent job. Once we start getting into the hundreds and thousands of rows, like, oh my God, no way, right? So a tool that we'll play with in the near future is called OpenRefine. This is a free tool that is really optimized for very large data sets, for making sure that we typed in Los Angeles the correct way in a large data set, or that we didn't accidentally skip a decimal point or something like that in a large data set. And so I'll just say that. So we're not quite there yet. We're building towards being able to use this. But for now, we're going to start playing with our a messy data set from LA rentals in the wake of last month's wildfires. So let's have at it. So everybody open up your computer and open up that data set, and then I'll orient us to that data set.